The holographic display flickered to life in the center of the War Studies amphitheater, and I felt my secondary stomach clench with anticipation. Professor Voktor, our Rigelian instructor with his triple-jointed arms and perpetually disappointed expression, gestured toward the shimmering blue light with what I can only describe as academic smugness. "Today, cadets, we examine the Battle of Hemlock Ridge," he announced, his voice carrying that particular tone teachers use when they think they're about to blow your minds. A textbook example of failed defensive strategy resulting in complete annihilation of the defending force. I glanced around at my classmates. Typical mixed batch, 3 Zenthari with their crystalline skin catching the projection light, a couple of Muradin engineers already taking notes, and sitting 2 rows behind me, the human. Cadet Brennan, quiet guy, kept to himself mostly, always looked tired. Humans usually did, honestly. Something about their sleep cycles being utterly ridiculous. The hologram expanded, showing a mountainous terrain with defensive positions marked in red. Attacking forces in blue swarmed from multiple vectors. Standard stuff. We'd analyzed dozens of battles this semester. The defending garrison numbered approximately 200. Voktor continued, manipulating the display with practiced ease. They held this position for 16 hours against an overwhelming force of nearly 3,000 attackers. Note the geographical advantages they possessed: elevated position, natural choke points, pre-established fortifications. One of the Zenthari, a studious female named Kix, raised her primary manipulator. "Professor, why did they not retreat when the situation became untenable?" "Excellent question." Voktor's mandibles clicked with approval. They were awaiting evacuation of civilian refugees from the valley below. Standard humanitarian protocol. Tragically predictable. The hologram showed the battle's progression. Hour 1, defenders holding strong. Hour 5, casualties mounting. Hour 12, positions collapsing. Hour 16, silence. Total casualties. Voktor paused for dramatic effect. 187 defenders killed. 13 captured, later executed. Not a single survivor who remained combat capable. The display zoomed in on specific positions, showing the desperate final stance. I noticed Brennan leaning forward in his seat, his knuckles white against the desk surface. Humans and their emotional responses, I thought. Always wearing everything right on their weird, flat faces. Now then, the professor's voice took on that particularly irritating pedagogical quality. Let us discuss the tactical failures that led to this inevitable outcome. First, the commanding officer's decision to permission to speak, Professor. Every head in the amphitheater swiveled. Brennan had stood up, his voice cutting through Voktor's lecture like a plasma cutter through hull plating. The professor's eye stalks narrowed. "Cadet Brennan," I was mid-sentence. "I know, sir, but you're getting it wrong." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. You could have heard a pin drop, assuming pins made noise in the vacuum of space, which they don't. But you get the idea that Voktor's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of barely controlled irritation. "I beg your pardon." Brennan walked down the steps toward the holographic display, moving with a deliberate care that suddenly seemed less like fatigue and more like someone carrying a very heavy weight. "The tactical analysis. It's incomplete. Misleading, actually." "Cadet," Voktor's voice held a warning edge. "This battle has been studied by military historians for 15 standard years. The data is conclusive." "The data," Brennan said, reaching the display and pointing at a specific position on the ridge, "doesn't tell you that Lieutenant Vasquez held that bunker for 3 hours after it should have fallen because she was singing old Earth songs to keep her squad's morale up. The data doesn't tell you that Corporal Kim rigged his position with every explosive he had and took 40 hostiles with him when they overran it, buying the civilians below another 20 minutes. His hand moved to another point. The data doesn't tell you that Private Okie stayed on the heavy gun until her hands were literally burned to the bone, or that Sergeant Morales dragged 6 wounded soldiers to the evacuation zone on a broken leg. The amphitheater had gone completely silent. Brennan's voice remained steady, but something in his eyes looked distant, like he was seeing something we couldn't. "How do you know these details, Cadet?" Voktor asked, his tone shifting from irritation to something approaching curiosity. Brennan turned away from the hologram, and when he looked at us, really looked at us, I saw something in that tired human face that made my blood run cold. Because I was there, Professor, he said quietly. Medical Corps, 2nd Battalion. I was the medic on Hemlock Ridge. The silence that followed was the kind that presses on your eardrums. The kind that makes you forget to breathe. That's impossible, Kix whispered. There were no survivors. Brennan's laugh was short, bitter, completely devoid of humor. No combat-capable survivors, the reports said. I wasn't combat-capable when they pulled me out. Wasn't anything capable, really. He looked back at the hologram, at the red markers indicating where his friends had died. So before we discuss their failures, Professor, maybe we should talk about the 1,700 civilians who made it off that mountain alive. Professor Vauctor stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, his eye stalks twitching in that particular way that meant his 3-part brain was processing information it hadn't anticipated. Finally, he gestured toward the hologram with one manipulator, his voice considerably less condescending than before. Perhaps, Cadet Brennan, you would care to provide your perspective on the engagement. Brennan nodded slowly, moving closer to the display. His fingers hovered over the controls, hesitating like touching them might burn. When he finally manipulated the hologram, the entire battle shifted, angles changing, new markers appearing. Hour 3, he began, his voice taking on a clinical quality that somehow made it worse. We knew we were dead. Command was clear. Hold until the last transport lifted. No retreats, no surrenders, no exceptions. The attacking force had numbers, momentum, and they were angry about some political thing I still don't understand. He zoomed in on a medical station marked in white. I set up here, in a cave system behind the main line. We had 43 wounded by hour 4. 17 critical. We had medical supplies for maybe 20 serious cases. Kix raised her manipulator tentatively. What did you do? Triage, Brennan said flatly. Fancy word for choosing who gets to maybe live and who definitely dies. I was 22 years old, 6 months out of medical training, and I was playing God with people I'd eaten breakfast with that morning. He manipulated the display again, showing the defensive positions collapsing inward. By hour 8, we'd pulled back to secondary positions. I had 68 wounded now. Still had supplies for 20. The math wasn't mathing, as we used to say. I watched his hand shake slightly as he pointed to different locations. Private Hayes, she was 19, took shrapnel to the abdomen. Kept apologizing for bleeding on me while I tried to hold her insides inside. Martinez lost both legs to a mine, kept asking if he could still play soccer. I told him yes. I lied a lot that day. The amphitheater was so quiet I could hear my own respiratory system working. Every cadet sat frozen, watching this human dissect his own trauma with surgical precision. Hour 12, Brennan continued. The main line broke. They came pouring through like water through a cracked dam. Lieutenant Vasquez, the one singing songs, she bought us 8 minutes. I know because I counted every second while I loaded wounded onto stretchers. He zoomed in on the evacuation zone. The transports could only take civilians on the first runs. Military personnel last. Orders from up top. Some political optics thing about protecting innocents. Noble. Stupid. We understood. Hour 14, I had 9 people who would die without immediate surgery. I had a cave, a basic surgical kit, and whatever painkillers I hadn't already used. No anesthesia left. Nothing. I performed 3 amputations and 2 emergency thoracotomies with soldiers biting down on leather straps while their friends held them still. Vauctor's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. That is medically improbable. That is war, Professor, Brennan replied, his voice hard as hull armor. Improbable is just another word for Tuesday. He manipulated the hologram to show the final hour. Hour 16. 53 wounded left in my cave. 40 dead already. The transports were making final runs. I could hear the explosions getting closer, could hear the screaming. Then Sergeant Morales, the one with the broken leg, he dragged himself into my cave and said the line had fallen. Said we had maybe 10 minutes. Brennan paused, his jaw working silently for a moment. I made a choice. I loaded every wounded soldier who could survive transport onto the last shuttles. The ones too critical to move. The ones who wouldn't make it. I gave them every painkiller I had left. Made them comfortable. Held their hands. Lied some more about how they'd be fine. The last transport lifted with me on it. I was holding pressure on a femoral bleed for a kid named Jackson who'd been in country for 2 weeks. He died 30 seconds after we cleared the atmosphere. I couldn't even remember his first name until 3 years later when it woke me up at 2 in the morning. He turned off the hologram completely, plunging that section of the amphitheater into relative darkness. So when you say there were tactical failures, Professor, you're absolutely right. The failure was sending 200 people to die for a political statement. The failure was inadequate medical supplies. The failure was command structure that valued optics over lives. Brennan looked around at all of us, and I realized with a start that tears were running down several cadets' faces, including, embarrassingly, my own. But those soldiers didn't fail. They fought like demons, died like heroes, and saved every single civilian they were sent to protect. 1,700 lives, Professor. That's not a failure. That's a victory bought with blood. He walked back to his seat slowly, and nobody spoke. Not Voktor, not Kix, not any of the 100 other cadets who suddenly felt very young and very stupid. Finally, the professor cleared his respiratory passages. Thank you, Cadet Brennan, for that illuminating perspective. I believe we should adjourn early today. Read chapters 9 through 12 for next session. Dismissed. As we filed out, I found myself walking near Brennan. He looked exactly as tired as he always did, but now I understood it was a different kind of tired. The kind that never really goes away. Hey, I said quietly, not sure what else to say. He glanced at me, something like a smile flickering across his face. Don't worry about it. Just wanted to set the record straight. Those people deserved better than being a case study in failure. As I watched him walk away down the corridor, I realized something that would stick with me through my entire military career. Humans didn't just fight wars. They carried them forever, in every tired step, every distant look, every story they'd never tell unless someone got it wrong. And somehow, impossibly, they kept getting up every morning anyway. So what did you think? Did this story surprise you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing science fiction stories every week. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.